Hello and welcome to another episode of the Under the Spell podcast series. Today I'm very excited to be joined by a respected journalist here in South Africa, someone whose content I've read a lot of. So now I guess the tables are turned in a way that you're reading the content that we've been putting out there, in specifically David and Robin with their new book, The Spell. And you were lucky enough to spend time on the beach reading the manuscript, which I was very jealous of as I was sitting here in Johannesburg. But certainly the book I feel has a lot of, through the storytelling, challenges the reader on a lot of different aspects. And I know for someone like you, you're obviously a very well-read individual. But did you find going through those different stories that, you know, it reinforced some of the our kind of preconceptions as individuals and as society, and kind of forces you to think that we often overvalue our ability to understand a situation or to make a decision. And did you find a similar trend, and have you seen it play out in kind of modern society as well?
Absolutely, and thanks for having me on. I mean, the one thing reading it, and the way it's written, as you say, it's a collection of shortish stories, a couple of pages maybe per each. And each of their own is interesting. In many cases, you will remember the event, or you would have read the book or read about it. And in some cases, it comes at you new. And initially when you start, I'm reading through it and I'm drawing dots, but it's kind of like almost like a mystery in a sense. And as you get through, it sort of channels itself down and works its way into a thinking. And I mean, there were a couple of things that struck with me, but the one that perhaps really struck with me, and it's mentioned a number of times in the book and philosophers around, we're not good people as a broad species. and that might not be a surprise to many. Many might say, well, you know, no, that's not what we're meant to be, or maybe some would dispute that. But that we have a capacity to do not good. And I don't mean that necessarily in a personal way. It might be the one example which absolutely like shook me. Earth Day, 1970. Yes. Here we are. I was born in 69. So, you know, you would think that I don't know, that we would have made progress. And we did. Ozone hole in the 80s. Poof, gone. Yeah. Not because of magic, because we did stuff as a country. But there was Earth Day in 1970, and here we are 55 years later, still doing Earth Day, still doing COP, and still just not actually managing anything. And maybe we could say it's science and you know, we haven't got a good enough grasp, and, you know, what would we do? We can't pull back on carbon as our source of energy and the like. Sure, but still 55 years and we're still doing Earth Day.
Absolutely. And do you think it's the fault of us as human beings in terms of our ability to fully comprehend the situation, or do you think that we're just not as good a people as we think we actually are?
Well, and again, it comes out in the book, and I mean, Aristotle talks around it, and many others there as well. We are not, excuse me, we are not inherently good or bad. We're just people. At the heart of it, we're cells, and those cells happen to manifest in a way, and that gives us intelligence, which, you know, as far as, well, we haven't found a more intelligent yet, but I put the emphasis on the yet part. We're neither good nor bad. We are what we want to make ourselves to be. And when I say we, I mean the societal we in many senses. And I think that is, you know, if we go back, you know, maybe 1,000 years ago or so, we were different, but we were doing the same sort of things. And I think that desire or that belief or that instruction that we should do good, I do think it's being eroded more now than it has been in the past. But I suspect that might just be personal bias because I'm alive in this moment and I'm not in previous's. But another example, I grew up a teenager in the 80s, new wave music and the like, and Cold Wars and the threat of nuclear war and the like, the apartheid locally. And I remember when the Berlin Wall came down, 11 November 1989, the photograph in what would have been the Daily News, which was my local paper the next day, of the wall being taken down. I clipped it out and I thought to myself, this is it. We have won. And by we, I mean the good. And again, here we are now 36 years later, and no, that pendulum had swung. But I think it is a pendulum. And I think it swings from one side to the other, both in societies, but probably also in individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a particular moment where you feel like us as humanity, we're progressing, we're becoming better. The capitalism has beaten communism
without bloodbath.
Yes,
just at the stroke of a pen, almost. A peaceful negotiation.
Exactly. Do you think you made mention that you feel like kind of the sense of goodness is perhaps feels like it's eroded after the last couple of years? Is there anything in particular that you think is causing that?
Yes, I think there's a lot to it. Social media. I mean, social media is toxic. And to be clear, I'm on social media. I got onto chat forums back in the Telkom, what were they? The bulletin boards. I forget what they were called. This goes back to the 80s, more aggressively in the 90s. And my first Twitter handle was @Simon. I was so early to Twitter. But then someone offered me $100 for it, so I gave it to them, and I became Simon PB. Things like that absolute interconnectedness. What someone will say to me on social media by the anonymousness of bits and pieces, they would never say to them. It's social media, I think, is absolutely a part of that problem. I then think that there are forces, and I use that obliquely, but we can come to more direct examples in a moment, who then use that for their own purpose. And President Trump is one who absolutely has. He is the classic divide to rule type of scenario, rather than the sort of unite to rule. And my sense of, and let's stay with American politics a moment, there would be this intense presidential election. Somebody would win, a Reagan, a Bush, another Bush, a Clinton, an Obama, whoever it might be. Someone would win, and things would kind of go back to normal. Okay, it's over. And yes, they were up there representing one half, but they are here for all of us. And I think we are starting to lose that, all of us, perhaps. And interestingly, we sort of, in South Africa, going the other way, where we had, under Mbeki, the 99 election, 2/3 majority, and now they're down, ANC's down to 40%. We are kind of sort of trying to merge it back into the pot. Other parts of the world are very much trying to divide it in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't help but feel like we're in one of the most polarized times that we've seen in recent history, and throughout the spell, it takes us through various different narratives, and sometimes these narratives don't always align. You have different perspectives. You got different versions of the truth and history. For someone like you, who is a journalist who spends their career trying to provide some version of the truth, how does that make you feel? How do you manage that?
I mean, it's hard. I always wanted to be a journalist, and I came here by a sort of curious and long road, but it's where I am now, and I love what I do. And certainly, I used to believe that there was a truth. And then I started to realize that there were interpretations of the truth, but I still believed that perhaps there was a truth. And now I don't, I mean, I still like to think I do believe that there is a truth, that there is a kernel which you can get to and say, this is it, this is the truth, this is what matters, and everything else not. I think that's probably true. I don't think it matters as much as I believed it did. I think how the truth is presented, how it's used, how it's weaponized or not weaponized, as the case may be, how it's perceived, I think those are probably the more important point, rather than an absolute. And when you step back from, so I'm in finance, in one sense, you can say, well, a company publishes a set of results, there's truth. And then we had Steinhoff, and then it's like, and many others. I picked Steinhoff because everyone knows who they were.
Yes.
And then you suddenly realize, well, hang on a second. So it boils down to what are we doing with it, and perhaps more, how are we sort of using it? I mean, you look at science, and a best friend of mine he's a hacker, he's a cryptologist, but his background is math, and I loved math at school. I loved science. I loved the truth. Of it.
1 + 1 = 2.
Every single time. Except when you step into the realm of science, and you speak about it, and David speaks about it in the book, dark matter. I mean, doesn't that bother us, that 90% of the world is like, we just don't know?
Yeah.
Einstein said he wasn't sure that his theory was right, and now we look at it and we're like, yeah, it probably wasn't.
Yeah.
But we haven't had, again, anything in 100 years to sort of move on that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's in a way part of the purpose of this book, is to force us to think a little bit more critically about the information that we have. And I mean, there are things I learned in high school that are no longer considered true.
Yes.
So it is very interesting. It makes you question a lot of the other things that you take for granted are truth, and whether they...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when I was reading the book and I was taking notes, the first note I wrote, which is, what is history?
Yeah.
And that classic cliche that history is written by the victors. So history is not history, it is a view from the person who won and obviously thought they were right and presents their side of it.
Yes.
So then it becomes a lot more murky as to, well, what really happened. I mean, forget a week ago, a month, a year, a decade, 100, 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
We just simply don't know. One of my favorite stats is Cleopatra was alive closer to us than she was the pyramids. Because the pyramids were about 2,500 years before she was born. She was born 2,000 odd years ago. And she looked at the pyramids, which is as much astonishment as we do.
Yeah.
And we're like, what are these things? Yet we just assume, well, she's Egyptian, she knew. No, in that arc of time, she didn't know either.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that kind of the book uncovers is some of the hypocrisies when it comes back to looking back at moments of time or kind of the major narratives of the period, and such things as climate change and social responsibility are two of the ones that are highlighted. Are there any of these hypocrisies in the book that kind of struck a nerve with you that...
I mean, lots, and I'm going to start with the easy one, nuclear power. I was a kid of the 80s. I read On the Beach, which is referenced in the book. I read it a couple of times. It shook me. When the Wind Blows comes out, Raymond Briggs, it's a graphic novel, and then later a movie. As I said, Cold War. I remember the Greenpeace protests happening in the UK around anti-nuclear power, and I was absolutely supportive of that. I thought Kuberg was a ridiculous idea. And have I been proved wrong? I mean, fundamentally. Now, as a weapon, nuclear power remains immensely scary, and unfortunately, outside of Japan at the end of World War II, it stayed off the table. Thank goodness for that. As a power source, however, it's not what we were terrified of. And we've had some disasters. Chernobyl, which is referenced, Fukushima, which is referenced both in the book. They were major meltdowns, and yet we have earthquakes in Turkey that more people die as a result of.
Yeah.
So it was that, my hostility towards nuclear power, and now Microsoft wants to reopen 3 Mile Island because we need it for data centers.
Yeah.
And the realization that what I just took to be, again, a truth, well, no, it wasn't. And to be clear, there are challenges with nuclear power, and it's expensive, but it's not dangerous, which is what we thought it was back in the 80s. And I'm going to blame youth and ignorance, but the point is again, something I believed to be true. We now look back and we have provable examples that says, nuclear power is not nearly as dangerous as, frankly, a coal-fired power plant out in in Mpumalanga somewhere, spewing toxins into the atmosphere.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, you talk about your beliefs and them being challenged. The book takes us back to ancient Greek philosophers, and what's fascinating is a lot of the things they were grappling with are matters that us as individuals in modern day are still grappling with. Understanding, who we are. Do we have a soul? How does the mind versus the brain work? None of these things over centuries and centuries have we actually been able to solve. Did you find, in terms of your beliefs, that some of them were challenged while reading this book, or that it kind of pushed you into a slightly different perspective?
I think one of the early chapters is Aristotle talking around, and I've mentioned it already, we're not innately good or bad, we're just beings. But one of the things, and in the email which I sent to you, was particularly around religion. As a youngster, as a younger teen, I was going to church and Sunday school and summer camps and stuff. Not so much because of the belief in God. My family moved 20 times before I was 10, and it was that sense of community. And I had, in a sense, forgotten that, what I had found in religion. And I'm atheist, and I haven't been to a church outside of weddings and funerals in 40 years. But there's something in the journal of it, of religion as a concept, which I had perhaps forgotten. And if you read all the major and even minor religions, and you read their texts, they talk around a caring. And if you use the Ten Commandments as just the one everyone knows, and it is Old Testament, so there's some weird stuff in it about idols and only one God and stuff like that. But if you look at what you've got there, which is, love thy neighbor, do not steal, do not kill, do not commit adultery, respect your parents, no one looks at that and says that is anything but not a good way to live your life.
Sure.
Everyone can agree, doesn't matter which side of which spectrum you're on, everyone can look at that and say, this is a nice way to look at it. And at the same time, you've got the US government shutdown and the accusation that foreigners are getting healthcare and shouldn't be given healthcare. Debate that's happening locally in South Africa, debate that's happening in the UK. So juxtaposed with that is we must watch a foreigner bleed to death in a hospital ward because they're different than us.
Yes.
And that shook me. That absolutely shook me. That, in a sense, we almost kind of had the recipe. We just, for reasons I can't quite get to, because social media and President Trump are easy excuses, but they're not the root cause of it. We are so far from where we could be. And what hit me was the what if. What if everyone out there kept a 10 commandments in their head and largely lived to that? What would we have today? And I don't just think it would be better interpersonal and less war and less conflict and theft and corruption. I think it would be better for everything. I think it would be better for science. I think it would just be a broadly much better planet that we're living on.
Absolutely. And having these thoughts, does it leave you worried at all for our future and the trajectory that we're on?
No more than I was before, because I am worried. Make no mistake, my niece and nephew are teens, and I look at them and I'm like, when I say I can't comprehend what they're going to experience in the next 70, 80, 90 years of their life. I really, really can't. I look at what's happened in my life. In my lifetime, we got TV, we got color TV. Now I've got TV on my phone. It goes everywhere with me. It's just, and of course it was linear TV, and during the day there was test patterns, stuff like that. Does the book make me more worried? I think it affirmed my concern for where society is. I think it also affirmed my concern that I'm not sure that the movement of right, and I use that very loosely as the people who are good, and I use that very loosely. I'm not sure where they are or what they're doing, or how do we join them, or how do we... It feels like it's almost a one-sided battle. And I don't know how it plays out. I know things that I can do in my own life in little ways that don't make the situation worse, but I don't know how we make it better and how we pull back from what is frankly a car screaming towards the cliff edge, it feels like at times.
Yeah, Simon, it's been fascinating to discuss this with you, and I guess that's also part of this book, is being able to give us a framework or a platform to have these kind of conversations. If I could ask you one last leading question, is if you were to recommend this book to someone, and you could say one thing, why do you think someone should go and read it?
I'm going to try and keep it short and pithy, for want of a phrase, because you're going to remember and learn a ton, and you're going to come out of it with, I think, a better understanding of what humanity really is in 2025.
Excellent. Thank you, Simon. Short and sweet. And for everyone else, please do go buy a copy of The Spell. As Simon says, a lot to learn on, a lot to force you to think critically about. But Simon, absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.